The rejection happened in less than 3 minutes, but the weight of it crushed an entire lifetime of hope. Ethan Walker stood outside the glass tower with his folder pressed against his chest, rain sliding down the building like silent laughter from the sky. He had worn his only suit, the one he bought after his wife died, because he promised himself he would never stop trying for a better life for his son. Inside that building, the CEO had already decided Ethan was not worth another second. Before this story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who never give up, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. This story may feel like fiction, but for many, it feels painfully real. Ethan Walker was not supposed to be sitting in a high-rise lobby that morning. He was supposed to be fixing broken machines in a small warehouse on the edge of the city, earning just enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. But his supervisor had handed him a printed job posting weeks earlier and told him he deserved more. The position was for a senior operations strategist at Blackridge Industries, a company so powerful its decisions could shift entire markets. Ethan hesitated at first because men like him rarely crossed paths with companies like that, but then he looked at his 8-year-old son Noah sleeping on a mattress beside the couch, clutching a worn-out toy car, and he decided to try. The morning of the interview was chaos. Noah had woken up with a fever, and the babysitter cancelled at the last minute. Ethan wrapped his son in a blanket, drove him to a neighbor's apartment, and promised he would be back soon. He tied his tie with shaking hands in the car, whispered a prayer he wasn't sure anyone still listened to, and walked into the building already exhausted. Every step felt like he was trespassing into a world that didn't want him. The interview room was cold, polished, and intimidating. The CEO, Jonathan Blackridge, sat at the head of the table, his presence sharp and distant, like a man who measured human value in efficiency charts and profit margins. Ethan explained his experience slowly, carefully, speaking about years of managing systems, solving crises under pressure, and keeping teams together when budgets collapsed. He spoke about leadership learned the hard way, through loss and responsibility, not textbooks. But Jonathan Blackridge barely looked up. His eyes lingered on Ethan's worn shoes, his outdated resume format, the small crack in his confidence that comes from being judged too often. The rejection came without cruelty, but that somehow made it worse. Jonathan concluded that Ethan lacked the executive background the role required, and suggested he aim lower. The meeting ended before Ethan could explain the depth of what he had done, the nights he had slept in offices to keep operations running, the sacrifices he had made. He walked out with his head down, the echo of that polished room ringing in his ears like a final verdict on his worth. Outside, the rain soaked through his jacket as he sat on a bench and stared at the city he had spent his life serving without recognition. His phone buzzed with a message from the neighbor saying Noah was asking for him. That simple line shattered him more than the rejection. Ethan stood up, wiped his face, and told himself he would keep going because his son needed him to. What Ethan didn't know was that the story didn't end when the elevator doors closed behind him. Jonathan Blackridge returned to his office and tried to move on with his day, but something nagged at him. There had been a familiarity in Ethan's name, a distant echo he couldn't place. Later that afternoon, a system failure hit one of Blackridge Industries' oldest manufacturing plants, causing a shutdown that threatened millions in losses. Executives scrambled, consultants failed, and panic spread across conference calls. The issue was complex, buried in outdated infrastructure no one fully understood anymore. An assistant pulled archived reports to trace the origin of the system design, and that was when Jonathan saw the name again. Ethan Walker. Not the applicant from that morning, but the engineer credited with designing the emergency fail-safe protocols the company still relied on decades later. The same protocols now preventing total collapse despite the current crisis. Jonathan's breath caught as he dug deeper into the records. Years ago, before Blackridge Industries became the giant it was, a young engineer named Ethan Walker had been brought in as an external consultant during a near-bankruptcy phase. That Ethan had worked relentlessly, refusing payment until the company stabilized, then quietly disappeared from the corporate world. Jonathan had been younger then, too focused on survival to remember faces, only results. The man he rejected that morning was not underqualified. He was foundational. As the crisis escalated, Jonathan ordered a background check, not out of curiosity but desperation. The report painted a life marked by tragedy. Ethan's wife had died suddenly from illness. Promotions disappeared when he asked for flexible hours to care for his child. Contracts ended when he refused unethical shortcuts. He hadn't fallen behind. He had been pushed aside. Jonathan felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Regret. Meanwhile, Ethan sat beside Noah's bed that evening, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth, whispering reassurance while fear gnawed at him. He wondered how long he could keep promising things would be okay without lying. His phone rang, and when he saw the company number, he almost ignored it. He assumed it was a mistake. What followed was not an apology spoken in perfect words, but a shift in power, tone, and recognition. Jonathan Blackridge didn't just ask Ethan to return. He asked him to help save the company, acknowledging that the system still standing bore Ethan's fingerprints. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen not as a liability, but as a pillar. The next days were relentless. Ethan worked with the same quiet intensity he always had, guiding teams, stabilizing operations, and solving problems others had written off as unsolvable. He didn't demand authority. He earned it through clarity and calm. Employees noticed. Executives listened. The company recovered, not just financially, but structurally, because someone finally understood its roots. Jonathan watched from a distance, humbled. The more he learned, the clearer it became that leadership was not about polish or pedigree, but about resilience, integrity, and the courage to keep showing up when no one applauds. He formally offered Ethan the position again, this time without conditions, with flexibility, respect, and long overdue compensation. Ethan accepted, not because of the title, but because it meant stability for Noah and proof that his years of sacrifice had not been wasted. The office that once rejected him now adjusted schedules around his parenting needs. The same halls that felt cold now carried quiet respect when he passed through. Months later, Ethan stood at the window of his new office watching the city glow at dusk. Noah sat on the floor nearby, drawing pictures and waiting patiently, no longer afraid that his father's effort would go unnoticed. Ethan didn't feel triumphant. He felt grateful. Grateful that identity, when finally recognized, had the power to rewrite a future. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own silent struggles or someone you love who keeps going without recognition, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need hope more than they admit. And before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us if you've ever felt overlooked despite giving your best, or if you believe second chances can change lives. The world didn't change overnight for Ethan Walker, but something far more important did. He learned that worth doesn't disappear just because it goes unseen, and that sometimes rejection is not the end of the road, but the moment just before the truth finally catches up. The real transformation did not begin with the job offer or the restored title. It began quietly, in the spaces no one applauded. Ethan Walker discovered that stepping into recognition after years of invisibility carried its own weight. Every morning he entered Blackridge Industries, he carried not pride, but caution, as if success might still be taken away if he relaxed for even a moment. He worked longer than required, listened more than he spoke, and made decisions with the same care he once used when choosing between groceries and medicine. The building no longer intimidated him, but it reminded him of how easily people could be misjudged. Jonathan Blackridge, on the other hand, found himself facing a different battle. For the first time in his career, he questioned his instincts. He replayed that interview in his mind, the way he dismissed Ethan without curiosity, the way power had blinded him to substance. Watching Ethan lead teams with empathy instead of fear slowly reshaped Jonathan's understanding of leadership. He began attending meetings he once delegated, listening instead of commanding, and for the first time, employees noticed a shift at the very top. Ethan's greatest challenge did not come from the boardroom, but from home. Noah struggled to adjust to his father's new schedule, afraid that success meant distance. One evening, after a long day of crisis management, Ethan found Noah asleep on the couch again, clutching that same old toy car. The sight broke him. He realized that no position was worth repeating the absence that grief had already forced into their lives. From that moment, Ethan set firm boundaries, leaving meetings early when needed, bringing Noah to the office on quiet weekends, teaching him that work and love did not have to compete. As weeks passed, stories about Ethan quietly spread through the company. Not rumors, but respect. Employees spoke of how he stayed late to help junior staff, how he remembered names, how he fixed systems without blaming people. For many, he became proof that competence did not need arrogance to be powerful. For single parents, caretakers, and those overlooked, he became something more. He became hope. Then came the test that would define everything. A major acquisition was underway, one that could either secure the company's future or destroy it. The board pushed aggressively, chasing profit and prestige. Ethan saw the cracks immediately. The numbers hid risks no one wanted to acknowledge. When he raised concerns, the room grew tense. This time, rejection did not come easily, but pressure did. Ethan stood alone against voices louder, richer, and more influential than his. That night, he barely slept. He thought of Noah. He thought of the warehouse job, the rain-soaked bench, the interview that nearly ended his belief in himself. He understood that speaking up again might cost him everything he had just gained. But he also understood something deeper. Silence would cost others far more. The next morning, Ethan presented a revised strategy, exposing the hidden dangers and offering an alternative path that required patience instead of speed. The room fell silent. Jonathan Blackridge watched closely, recognizing the same courage that once saved the company when no one remembered the man behind it. This time, Jonathan spoke up first, backing Ethan fully. The decision changed the company's trajectory. Short-term applause was lost, but long-term stability was secured. Analysts later praised Blackridge Industries for avoiding what could have been a catastrophic failure. Internally, something even more valuable was gained: trust. Ethan Walker was no longer just an executive. He became a reference point for what the company stood for. At home, life softened. Noah laughed more. The toy car was replaced with school books and bigger dreams. Ethan attended school events without guilt, answered late-night questions about the future, and finally allowed himself to believe that survival was no longer his only purpose. Jonathan Blackridge eventually addressed the company in a rare, unscripted message, acknowledging mistakes and praising the man he once dismissed. He did not frame it as generosity, but as accountability. That moment rippled far beyond the walls of the building, reminding everyone that growth begins when ego ends. If this continuation of Ethan's journey is resonating with you, if you've ever stood alone for what was right or balanced responsibility with sacrifice, take a moment to engage with this video. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help these stories reach people who may be on the edge of giving up. And before we reach the final moments, please comment below and tell us whether you believe true leadership is born from struggle, or if you've seen quiet strength change a life. In the end, Ethan Walker did not rise because his identity was finally recognized. He rose because he never abandoned it. And for those watching, perhaps the most powerful truth remains this: the world may overlook you, but your worth is never erased, and one day, it may be the very thing that saves everything.